the file he never bothered to read. No, that cannot be true. My former husband, Farhan Malik, did not say the words loudly. He barely breathed them. Yet the family courtroom in Rawalpindi had gone so still that every person heard him. For 2 days, Farhan and his expensive lawyer had described me as damaged, unstable, and unfit to raise our son. They turned every limp, nightmare, and scar into evidence that I should lose the child I had raised alone for nearly 10 years. Farhan sat opposite me in a tailored charcoal suit. Behind him, his second wife, Sana, once his colleague and secret lover, watched with folded arms and cold confidence. Then Judge Nadia Siddiqui opened my sealed military record. She adjusted her glasses, turned several pages, and stopped at one paragraph. She read a single sentence. That was all it took. The color vanished from Farhan's face, as if someone had drained the blood from him. "No," he whispered again. "That cannot be true." Judge Siddiqui slowly raised her eyes. "It appears," she said, her voice calm and measured, "that this court has been presented with a dangerously incomplete picture." And in that moment, I understood something I had not understood during our marriage. For the first time in almost a decade, Farhan was afraid. Not of me, of the truth. The strangest part was that I had never hidden it. He had simply never cared enough to ask. 9 years earlier, I did not return from my final deployment looking like the heroines people celebrate on television. I returned to Pakistan in pieces. The military aircraft landed at Nur Khan Air Base, outside Rawalpindi, on a gray October afternoon. I remember almost nothing about the landing. Painkillers blurred the world. I remember disinfectant, the crushing brace around my left leg, and the fire in my ribs whenever I breathed. I remember looking through the small aircraft window and seeing the familiar dusty green landscape beneath a pale sky. Home. After months in a conflict zone, the roads, rooftops, and distant hills looked impossibly peaceful. Mostly, I remember thinking I was finally going home to my husband and baby boy. Our son, Hamza, was only 3 months old. Before leaving, I had kissed his tiny forehead while he slept in his grandmother's arms. The deployment was supposed to be short. I had promised Farhan I would be back before Hamza learned to roll over. Instead, everything changed. Our convoy had been escorting doctors, relief workers, and displaced families during a humanitarian evacuation when an explosive device struck the lead vehicle. Flames swallowed the road. Smoke turned the afternoon black. People screamed from inside a burning transport truck. I crawled through shattered glass, dragged one young soldier from the flames, and returned for another despite warnings of a second blast. Then I reached a trapped teenage girl pinned beneath twisted metal. Then the second explosion came. The force threw me across the road. When I woke, I could not feel my left leg. Broken ribs, a shattered pelvis, severe damage to my knee, internal bleeding, months, possibly years of rehabilitation. The doctors said I would walk again, but recovery would demand patience, discipline, and support. I believed my family and I would face it together. I could not have been more wrong. Farhan met me at Combined Military Hospital Rawalpindi with a bouquet of white lilies. Looking back, I think he brought them because husbands were expected to bring flowers. He smiled for visiting officers, held my hand before nurses, and kissed my forehead for a photograph. I remember thinking how fortunate I was. I did not know he had already chosen another life. 2 days after I was moved from intensive care to a private ward, Farhan entered my room carrying a brown legal envelope. He did not sit down. He did not ask about my therapy. He did not ask whether I had slept, whether I was frightened, or whether I needed him. He placed the envelope on the blanket covering my damaged legs. "I have already signed everything," he said. I frowned. "What is it?" "A talaq notice and the divorce documents. My lawyer has prepared everything." For a moment, I thought the medication had made me misunderstand him. "What?" "I cannot do this anymore, Aisha." I stared at him. "We have a baby." "I know. I am still in hospital." "I know. I cannot even stand." He looked toward the window, refusing to meet my eyes. Then he said the words that would stay with me for the rest of my life. I did not marry someone I would have to care for forever. The machines kept beeping, but the silence inside the room felt heavier than stone. I searched his face for guilt, hesitation, anything human. There was nothing. "What about Hamza?" I asked. "I will pay whatever the court orders." "You have barely held him since I returned." He will be better off without all this. Farhan gestured toward the wheelchair beside my bed, the metal braces around my leg, and finally toward me. For years, I wondered whether he regretted saying those words. Now I know he meant every one of them. 3 days after I was discharged, my older brother, Bilal, drove me to the small house Farhan and I had rented in Rawalpindi. Farhan was not there. His clothes were gone. Half the furniture had disappeared. So had our wedding photographs and most of Hamza's gifts from Farhan's family. Only another folder from his lawyer waited on the dining table. That afternoon, our neighbor, Mrs. Javed, came across the lane carrying a pot of chicken yakni and fresh roti. She stood awkwardly at the door before speaking. I was not sure whether anyone had told you. Told me what? I saw Farhan yesterday. My stomach tightened. He was moving into an apartment in Baria town. She paused. He was not alone. I already knew. Somewhere inside me, I had known before she finished the sentence. A week later, another officer's wife sent me a restaurant photograph. Farhan was laughing across a candlelit table, holding Sana's hand, the colleague he had always called just a colleague. The timestamp showed the photograph had been taken before my deployment ended. Perhaps the affair had begun even before I left. My injuries had not caused Farhan to betray me. They had merely given him permission to stop pretending. While he built a new life, my days began before sunrise with pain medication, wound dressings, physical therapy, and the impossible task of learning how to transfer from bed to wheelchair while holding an infant. I learned to feed Hamza from a wheelchair, lower myself without falling, and smile for visitors even when my ribs felt ready to split. A military psychologist once asked what frightened me most. I surprised myself with the answer: that my son will grow up believing his father left because of me. She studied me for a long moment and then said, "Children may not remember every person who walked away, but they always remember the one who stayed." That sentence carried me through the darkest nights. Some evenings, I slept upright. On others, Hamza cried with colic while I moved through the hallway on a walker, praying my damaged leg would hold until he slept. Sometimes I wondered whether Farhan had been right, whether I was too broken and exhausted to give Hamza the life he deserved. Then he would close his tiny fingers around mine. And suddenly, I had another reason to stand. Literally, every painful step during rehabilitation became a promise. Not to defeat Farhan or impress anyone, but to ensure my son never doubted that someone would fight for him. I had survived a battlefield. Now I had another war to win. People often say time heals every wound. It does not. Time simply gives you more opportunities to decide what you will do with the wounds you carry. For me, healing was not measured in weeks or months. It was measured in tiny victories. The first time I stood unaided. The first time I crossed the living room with a cane. The first morning I lifted Hamza from his cot without crying. No one applauded or pinned a medal on me, but they were victories all the same. Every weekday began at around 5:30. Hamza woke cheerful, usually before the first call to prayer had faded over the neighborhood. I would ease myself out of bed, gripping the bedside table until my left leg steadied beneath me. The doctors had been right. I walked again, though never the same way. Winter and monsoon reminded me of every fracture. Stairs remained difficult, running was impossible. Still, I walked. After feeding Hamza, Bilal stopped by on his way to work. "You all right?" he asked every morning. "I am fine." "You sure?" "No." It became our private joke. He would laugh, kiss Hamza, fix whatever needed fixing, and leave without making me feel like a burden. Not once did he look at me the way Farhan had. My parents lived in Lahore, but called every evening. Ami sent food and clothes. Abu told bedtime stories by video until Hamza recognized his voice instantly. Little by little, our wounded family stopped feeling wounded. After nearly 18 months of rehabilitation, I was medically retired from active service. Handing over my active duty identification card hurt more than I expected. The Pakistan Army had been my identity since my early 20s. It had given me discipline, purpose, friendship, and a belief that service mattered. Now I had to discover who Lieutenant Colonel Aisha Rahman was without a uniform. Fortunately, one of my former commanding officers refused to let me disappear. Brigadier Samina Qureshi called one afternoon. "I hear you have been sitting at home for too long." "I have a 4-year-old, I replied. "So do half the competent officers in General Headquarters." I laughed for the first time that week. "I cannot relocate." I did not ask you to. She offered me a civilian position with a defense logistics and disaster response contractor in Islamabad. It was not glamorous, but it used my experience in logistics and emergency planning while bringing me home to Hamza every evening. I accepted. Money remained tight. I sold the large vehicle Farhan and I had purchased together and bought a reliable second-hand sedan. Our house was modest, with peeling paint, a crooked cupboard door, and a courtyard barely large enough for a swing. But it was ours. More importantly, it was peaceful. Farhan paid the monthly child maintenance ordered by the court. Nothing more. No birthday cards, Eid visits, calls, school functions, or questions about Hamza's health and fears. Sometimes months passed without Hamza mentioning him. When he began asking difficult questions, I promised not to poison his heart because his father had broken mine. One evening after Hamza's kindergarten graduation, he climbed beside me on the sofa, still wearing the paper badge his teacher had pinned to his shirt. Ammi? Yes, Jan? Why does my father never come? Children ask impossible questions with such simple voices. I switched off the television. Your father made different choices. Did he not love me? The question struck harder than any explosion I had survived. I pulled him into my arms. Listen to me carefully. There is nothing wrong with you. Then why did he leave? Sometimes adults make selfish decisions. Is he a bad man? I thought carefully before answering. No. Hamza frowned. He made bad choices, I said. That is not always the same thing. It was a distinction I hoped he would understand one day. As the years passed, I watched Hamza become the kind of child every parent prays to raise. He held doors for strangers. He thanked waiters by name. He carried grocery bags for our elderly neighbor without being asked. Every Defense Day, he insisted on placing white flowers at the local martyrs' memorial. Not because I told him to, because he wanted to. He became fascinated by military history and public service, reading about soldiers, rescue workers, and doctors who stayed in disaster zones. He watched documentaries with Abu and asked endless questions. One Saturday morning, he looked at me across the breakfast table. Ami, were you afraid? Where? When you were deployed. I smiled. Every day. His eyes widened. Really? Being brave does not mean you are never afraid. What does it mean? It means you do the right thing even while you are afraid. He nodded slowly. I could almost see the lesson settling inside him. Meanwhile, Farhan's life looked perfect from a distance. Acquaintances mentioned luxury dinners, trips abroad, an expensive Islamabad house, new cars, and posed photographs with Sana. From the outside, he seemed to have everything he had wanted. I stopped paying attention years earlier. Then one afternoon changed everything. It happened during Hamza's fourth grade achievement ceremony. After the program, his class teacher, Mrs. Saeed, pulled me aside. Mrs. Rahman, I wanted you to know that Hamza has been nominated. For what? The Quaid-e-Azam Junior Leadership Fellowship. I had never heard of it. She smiled. It is highly selective. Students receive leadership training, community service placements, academic mentorship, and access to scholarship recommendations. Retired officers, educators, and public service leaders guide them. That night, I learned that only a small number of children were accepted each year. Hamza wrote essays, completed interviews, volunteered at a food drive, and practiced his presentation until he no longer needed notes. Months later, the acceptance envelope arrived. Hamza burst through the front door, waving it above his head. I got in. I hugged him so tightly that he laughed. I knew you could do it. Neither of us realized that someone else had been watching. Exactly 3 weeks later, a registered envelope arrived from a law chamber in Islamabad. I opened it while standing in the kitchen. The first line made my stomach drop. Petition for permanent custody and guardianship of the minor child, Hamza Farhan Malik. Farhan was not asking for visits. He was asking the court to take my son away from me. And as I continued reading, I realized this was not about fatherhood. It was about ownership. It was about prestige. It was about winning. I must have read the first page 10 times before the words became real. Permanent custody, full guardianship, immediate transfer of residence. I stood frozen beside the screaming kettle. Hamza entered with his school bag hanging from one shoulder. Me? I quickly folded the documents. Is everything all right? I forced a smile. Just office paperwork. He nodded and ran upstairs. I waited until his bedroom door closed before I allowed myself to cry. Not because I believed Farhan deserved to win, because after nearly 10 years of silence, he had suddenly decided he deserved to be called a father. The next morning, I met Advocate Mariam Bashir, a family law specialist recommended by another retired officer. Her modest office near the Rawalpindi courts was crowded with files, law books, family photographs, and a chipped tea tray. Mariam had handled custody and guardianship cases for almost 30 years. She read Farhan's petition without speaking. When she finally looked up, she sighed. This is not really about custody. I know. He waited nearly a decade. I know. He did not even use the visitation opportunities available to him. I know. She tapped one paragraph with her pen. Here is the strategy. They are claiming your combat injuries left you physically limited and emotionally unstable. They say Hamza will have greater opportunities, better social standing, and a more secure future with his father. I laughed not because it was funny, but because the insult was almost absurd. A secure future? Miriam nodded. We will need evidence, not anger. I have every medical evaluation. Good. I have worked full-time for 7 years. Excellent. His teachers know me. His doctor knows me. The neighbors know me. We will call them. Then she leaned forward. Aisha, have you ever hidden your medical condition from a court? No. Have you ever lied during a psychological assessment? Never. Have you ever neglected Hamza because of your injuries? No. She smiled faintly. Then do not begin behaving like someone who has something to hide. I wanted to believe her confidence. But I had lived long enough to know that truth does not always win quickly. Sometimes truth must fight for the right to be heard. Over the following weeks, we gathered school, medical, employment, and volunteer records, along with statements from teachers and neighbors. Every document told the same story. A stable home, a healthy child, a mother who had been present. Farhan's lawyer, however, seemed determined to turn my military service into a disease. During my deposition, his questions became increasingly insulting. Mrs. Rahman, do loud noises still startle you? Sometimes. Do you experience nightmares? Occasionally. So you admit your deployment continues to affect your daily life? It affects my memories. Is that not the same thing? No. He frowned. I continued before he could interrupt. I remember the blast. I remember losing soldiers under my command. I remember being wounded. But I have never forgotten to collect my son from school, take him to a doctor, feed him, protect him, or listen when he changed direction. You still walk with a limp. Yes. Can you run? No. If Hamza were in danger, how would you reach him? My body would punish me afterward. I held his gaze. But I would still reach him before anyone who had spent 9 years absent from his life. For several seconds, he said nothing. Outside the room, Miriam smiled. You handled that well. I have answered questions before military inquiry boards. I could tell. Still, Farhan's behavior troubled me. He did not act like a father desperate to rebuild a relationship. He acted like a businessman acquiring an asset. The answer came unexpectedly. One Saturday, while Hamza attended football practice, Bilal arrived carrying 2 cups of tea. His expression was unusually serious. I think I know what this is about. What? I met an old university friend. He works in Farhan's company. I waited. Farhan has been telling people that his son was selected for the leadership fellowship. He says Hamza is being prepared for scholarship recommendations, elite colleges, perhaps even a future cadet or public service career. I frowned. He never congratulated Hamza. Bilal shook his head. But he has been congratulating himself. Everything became clear. The fellowship, prestige, photographs, and successful son he could display as proof of his own importance. Farhan did not suddenly want to raise Hamza. He wanted to claim him. He wanted to erase the years he had been absent and step into the story at the moment applause began. The realization hurt less than I expected. Perhaps because it confirmed what I already knew. He had not changed. The trial began in early spring. The courtroom felt familiar. Military hearings had trained me to stay calm. But no promotion or career was at stake. This was my child. Farhan looked successful. His navy suit had been cut perfectly. A gold watch flashed beneath his sleeve. Sana sat behind him in cream, pearls at her throat, the picture of respectable Islamabad society. I arrived with Mariam and one worn leather folder. Inside it were nearly 10 years of truth. Judge Nadia Siddiqui entered at 9 o'clock. After reviewing the petition, she invited Farhan's lawyer to begin. For almost an hour, he painted a sorrowful picture of a wounded veteran with permanent limitations and unresolved trauma. Again and again, he called me disabled, as though the word itself proved that I could not love, guide, or protect a child. When our turn came, Mariam did not attack Farhan. She introduced evidence: employment records, medical evaluations, school reports, volunteer certificates, our doctor's testimony, and a letter from Hamza's headmistress describing me as consistently present and deeply involved. Every witness described the same woman: dépendable, patient, prepared, present. Then Farhan took the stand. "I have always loved my son," he declared. Mariam rose. "When was the last birthday celebration you attended?" Silence. "When did you last meet his teacher?" Silence. "What is Hamza's favorite school subject?" Farhan hesitated. "Science." "It is history." Mariam continued. "What size shoes does he wear?" No answer. "What food causes his allergic reaction?" Farhan looked at his lawyer. "I do not remember." "Which hospital treated him when he fractured his ankle last year?" "I was not informed." "You were sent a message and did not reply." Farhan lowered his eyes. Mariam thanked him and returned to her seat. Judge Siddiqui's expression did not change. She reviewed the exhibits for several minutes before speaking. "I noticed repeated references to Mrs. Rahman's military service." She looked toward Farhan's lawyer. "Has the court received her complete service record?" "No, Your Honor. We received medical summaries." "I would like the complete record." The room became quiet. A court clerk left through a side door and returned several minutes later carrying a sealed file that had been officially released for judicial review. She placed it before the judge. Judge Siddiqui broke the seal without ceremony. She turned through service history, promotions, performance evaluations, medical reports, commendations, and operational assessments. No one spoke. Farhan began to look comfortable again. I knew what he believed. He thought the record would confirm serious injury, reduced mobility, and medical retirement. He had no idea what else it contained. Neither did his lawyer. Halfway through, the judge stopped at one paragraph and read it twice. Then she looked at me. "Lieutenant Colonel Rahman, was this section previously restricted?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And it has now been cleared for disclosure?" "Yes." Across the courtroom, Farhan shifted in his chair. Judge Siddiqui adjusted her glasses. "I will read part of this evaluation into the record." Every person leaned forward as she read. Despite sustaining multiple life-threatening injuries, Lieutenant Colonel Asha Rahman refused evacuation until every soldier, medical worker, and civilian under her protection had been removed from the danger zone. Subsequent military psychological assessments unanimously found that her decision-making under extreme stress remained exemplary, her emotional stability exceptional, and her commitment to the welfare of those in her care unwavering. Silence. Absolute silence. The words hung in the room like the echo of a struck bell. I closed my eyes for 1 second. I had not heard the citation read aloud in years. When I opened them, Farhan had gone pale. "No," he whispered. "That cannot be true." Judge Siddiqui looked directly at him. "Mr. Malik, did your lawyer review this record?" His lawyer looked genuinely shaken. "No, Your Honor, I was not provided with the complete file." The judge raised one eyebrow. "That is apparent." The lawyer scanned his copy, then closed it and rubbed his forehead. Mariam leaned toward me. "Their case has just collapsed." But the hearing was not over. Judge Siddiqui folded her hands. "Mr. Malik, you have repeatedly claimed that Mrs. Rahman's injuries made her incapable of sound parental judgment." "Yes, Your Honor, but I was not aware." "The official military assessments conclude the opposite." Farhan swallowed. The judge continued. "This court also has nearly 10 years of school records, medical records, and testimony. Mrs. Rahman attended every parent meeting. She managed every medical appointment. She supported the child's education, community service, and emotional development." She turned another page. "I have found no evidence that she ever failed to place Hamza's welfare before her own." Then she looked at Farhan. "I have found substantial evidence that you voluntarily chose not to participate in your son's daily life for almost a decade." His lawyer stood. "Your Honor." She raised one hand. "I am not finished." He sat down. The judge turned toward Hamza, who sat beside the court-appointed child counselor. "Hamza, Do you understand why you are here? A little, ma'am. Do you feel safe with your mother? Yes. Does she care for you properly? Every day. What would you like this court to know? Hamza hesitated. Then, with the simple honesty only a child can possess, he said, "My mother never quits." The room fell silent. "I hurt my ankle playing cricket last year," he continued. "She carried me into emergency even though her own leg hurt." His voice trembled. "She always says soldiers do not leave people behind." He looked at me and gave a small smile. "She never left me behind either." Tears rolled down my face. Every painful therapy session, every feverish night, every lonely Eid, every school project completed after midnight had led to that sentence. Judge Siddiqui removed her glasses. "Thank you, Hamza." When she looked at Farhan again, her voice remained calm, but disappointment sharpened every word. "Mr. Malik, there is a profound difference between becoming interested in a child and becoming a parent." Farhan lowered his head. For the first time since I had known him, he had nothing to say. After a long pause, Judge Siddiqui delivered her ruling. "This court recognizes the value of a healthy relationship with both parents. However, parenthood is measured by consistent love, sacrifice, responsibility, and presence, not by biology or social status alone." She turned toward me. "The evidence overwhelmingly demonstrates that Lieutenant Colonel Asha Rahman has provided Hamza with a stable, loving, and secure home despite extraordinary physical challenges. Her injuries have not diminished her ability to parent. If anything, they appear to have deepened her commitment to her son." I lowered my eyes, fighting tears. Someone had finally seen the appointments, school mornings, birthdays, fears, and endless choosing to remain. The judge looked back at Farhan. "You cannot disappear during the difficult years and return only when the rewards become impressive." She closed the folder. "The petition for permanent custody and guardianship is denied." Farhan shut his eyes. The judge continued, "If you sincerely wish to become part of Hamza's life, that opportunity may still exist. But it will not begin with possession. It will begin with trust." She ordered gradual supervised visitation through a family counselor. There would be no sudden change to Hamza's home, school, or routine. Every step would depend on his comfort and emotional welfare. Outside, spring sunlight warmed the courthouse steps. No reporters or cameras waited. People simply moved toward cars, rickshaws, and tea stalls. That was exactly how I wanted it. Bilal wrapped me in the strongest hug he had given me since I returned from deployment. "I told you," he said. "You did. No one was taking that boy away." Hamza hugged both of us. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Farhan stood several meters away. Sana remained near the entrance but did not approach. For the first time in years, Farhan looked directly into my eyes. "I owe you an apology. I waited. I should have stayed. Yes. I was selfish. Yes. I convinced myself that leaving was easier. It was easier for you." He looked toward Hamza. "I kept telling myself there would be time later." His voice broke. Then almost 10 years disappeared. No apology could return Hamza's first steps, school days, cricket matches, illnesses, birthdays, or frightened nights. "I cannot change what I did," Farhan said. "No, but I would like the chance to become a better father." I looked at Hamza. The decision was no longer mine alone. I knelt beside him. "You heard everything. What do you think?" He considered the question longer than many adults would have. Finally, he faced Farhan. "You hurt my mother." Farhan closed his eyes. "I know. You hurt me too. I know." After another silence, Hamza said, "I do not forgive people because they deserve it." He glanced at me. "Ami taught me that forgiveness is something you choose so anger does not control you." Farhan began to cry real tears, the kind that come when a person finally stops lying to himself. "I would like to know you," Hamza continued, but slowly. Farhan nodded immediately. "As slowly as you need." That was the beginning, not of a perfect family, because perfect families exist mostly in advertisements and films, but of an honest one. During the following year, Farhan showed up awkwardly and imperfectly, but increasingly consistently. Counseling was difficult. Trust returned more slowly than it had broken, and Hamza tested every promise. Yet little by little, father and son found common ground. Farhan began volunteering with an organization that supported wounded veterans and their families. One afternoon, after a counseling session, he spoke quietly to me. When the judge read your service record, I realized I had spent years telling myself you were broken. I looked at him. He gave a sad smile. The truth was that I was the one who ran. I did not answer. I did not need to. Life had already answered for me. Today, Hamza is preparing for university. He still wants a life of service. He may join the armed forces, become a doctor or civil servant, or choose something none of us has imagined. That choice belongs to him. I am simply proud that hardship did not harden his heart. Looking back, I understand something I could not understand while lying in that hospital bed nearly 10 years ago. The greatest victory was not winning in court. It was not proving Farhan wrong. It was not hearing my military record read aloud. The greatest victory was raising a son who learned that strength is not measured by rank, medals, money, or revenge. It is measured by character. The people who remain beside us through life's hardest battles often shape us far more deeply than those who walk away. Some courage arrives with uniforms and salutes. The courage that saves a family is quieter. It wakes before dawn, walks on a damaged leg, comforts a frightened child, chooses patience, and stays. The end.